Hey everybody, welcome to episode 13. I can't believe we're already at our 13th episode. For a lot of people, 13 is a lucky number, so hopefully some of you watching are gonna have some good luck because of this. We are going to have so much fun today, but before we get started, I was gonna share, I just got back from Oaxaca, Mexico. I went down to a prehistoric mole cooking class. So you know that's gonna be probably a couple of future episodes. So that was an amazing trip, can't wait to share that with you. And also, I was out for my morning walk this morning in Memorial Park, and while I was walking, I got a DM from a viewer that just saw last week's episode, which was the interview with Marina Montesvais with the State of the Arts. And I just wanted to say thank you for those of you that leave comments on our episodes and continue reaching out with your messages. I really appreciate it. So we're gonna have so much fun today because we're going to be demystifying the Amuse Bouche. I still run into a lot of people that are not familiar with the Amuse Bouche, and actually for events that I do at home, it is absolutely one of my favorite things. So amuse bouche is a French word, and it literally means mouth amuser or palate teaser. And really what they're intended to do is they're intended to set the stage for the main entree of a dining experience. I think of the amuse bouche as kind of like, you know, if you go to like a musical or an opera or a symphony, and sometimes there'll be an overture before it actually starts. That's kind of how I think of the amuse bouche, because it's really an opportunity for the chef or whoever is hosting the experience to showcase their style of how they cook. They can be a palate cleanser, but not always. They can be a complement to what's coming with the entree, or they can just be a sample of the chef's style of, you know, how the chef might like to combine flavors, or, you know, just kind of setting the tone for what the main entree is going to be. I love the amuse bouche because typically they're unique. They're usually visually thoughtful and stunning. And again, it's one of those opportunities for the chef to be creative. And, you know, depending on how you course your meal, you might start right off the bat with an amuse bouche. So it could potentially be a warm welcome to a dining experience. Or if you're serving multiple courses and you bring the amuse bouche in right before the entree, it could be a magic moment. So there's a lot of ways to have fun with it. I'm gonna actually share 3 of my favorites with you here today. Let's have some fun. Okay, so the first amuse bouche we're gonna be creating together today uses a smoked salmon, just a very typical Norwegian Atlantic smoked salmon, cream cheese, caviar, some broccoli microgreens, and there's a lot of variations on how you can create this. We're gonna be using a thin sliced multigrain bread as the base today. You can use crackers. You can also use, I've used like a mini pancake before. It's a little bit sweeter, but also a really good option. So there's kind of multiple ways you can put this together, but those are the primary ingredients. So every week when you see the intro at the very beginning of our videos, one of the dishes that I'm making here in the kitchen is a variation on what we're creating here. So let's get started. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get our bread ready, which is the base. So for those of you that saw maybe snips of the Mother's Day shorts that we did with the Mother's Day brunch setup, I got some really great feedback and comments on people asking about the little tea sandwiches, the perfectly circular tea sandwiches. So the way we do this bread is exactly the way we did the bread for those sandwiches. So what you want to do is about an hour before you're ready to put all this together, you want to pop your bread in the freezer. That's the secret. Freeze your bread. Then what we do is we just take a cookie cutter, and with the bread nice and frozen, what it does is it gives us a nice crisp edge with the cookie cutter. So we use that cookie cutter, we go through, pull that out, and then we get that perfect circle, which is going to be the base of what we're doing. Okay, now that we've got our bread ready, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get our salmon ready. So there's several ways you can do this. Because we're using a piece of bread, which is pretty sizable, bigger than a cracker, we've got a little more room to work with. I like to do kind of a spiral roll up with the salmon. So let's start. We'll get one of our pieces of salmon out. So we'll lay that out, kind of get it flat. Then what I like to do is from there, you just start rolling. So you roll it up, roll it around nice and tight. And then once you've got it rolled, what I'll do is I'll kind of fold down maybe that last layer of the roll, just so it gives it a little bit of visual interest. So that's how I like to roll the salmon. So we'll do one more of those just for example. So like I said, we just roll that up. And then once you've got that roll down, you can just kind of fold that last layer around, and that gives us a nice little shape to go on to our amuse bouche. All right, so we've got the salmon ready. Now the last thing we're going to do is I kind of pre-cut these lime slices, but I'll show you what I did there just so you understand. Really what we're going for is using the rind of the lime, almost like a zest. We're not actually zesting it, but it's actually for the flavor of the peel on what we're doing with this particular amuse bouche. So just, you wanna slice your lime absolutely as thin as possible. We don't want it to be like a big bite of lime peel. So do a really kind of thin slice. We're gonna cut that in half, like that. And then I actually like to use the kitchen shears for this. When you start cutting the lime apart, it loses its stability, so a knife can kind of break it up. So I use the kitchen shears, and I'm just trimming away kind of the interior of that so that we get a little bit of lime, and like I said, the peel, just like that. And that's what we're gonna use. So now we've got our limes ready. All right, that's pretty much everything. Let's put this together. So the first thing we're going to do is we're gonna put a little layer of the cream cheese onto the bread. Now, another thing to remember, if you can think of it, about 2 hours before you're starting, take that cream cheese out of the fridge so that it's room temperature by the time you're ready to start. It spreads so much easier if it's room temperature. If you forget to do that, you can always microwave it for a bit, but you just don't want to heat it up. So I would suggest if you're going to do the microwave route, do it in maybe 10-second increments and just test it till you can see it's nice and smooth and creamy and very spreadable. But I took mine out, so it's room temperature. So we're going to start. You don't want to go all the way to the edge. You want to get a nice layer going, but don't go quite to the edge so that it's kind of anchored by the bread. All right, so we've got our cream cheese onto, I'm doing 6 pieces. We've got our cream cheese onto our 6 pieces of our circular bread cut out. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the salmon. So we'll just start with one of these. Then we'll take our salmon and just kind of angle it all the way across like this. Give it a little bit of a curve to kind of follow the shape of the bread. All right, now that we have all of our salmon placed on top of the bread and the cream cheese, we're gonna add our pieces of lime. And imagine the shape of the lime, you know, we cut out kind of the middle part of the wedge. That's gonna be like the receptacle where the caviar goes. So we're gonna take these and we're gonna add these right in, get that looking a little cleaner there, right next to where the salmon is. So that little piece of lime goes right up next to our salmon, just like that. All right, we've got our lime placed, and so now our next to the last step is we're gonna add the caviar. Now, let's talk a little bit about caviar. So I'm actually using, this is the roe of black lumpfish. Now it's marketed as caviar, but it's a lot less expensive. So when you start looking in the caviar world, you've got kind of your entry-level type options, which this is. Then you've got kind of your mid-tier options that can be anywhere from maybe like $40 to $80 for like a small tin, like which this was. And then from there, you jump up to your premium caviar, and that's gonna put you in anywhere between $200 and $400 for about this amount. Now, since we're doing this as an amuse bouche, we've got multiple flavors going on, very complimentary of the caviar. But one of the reasons I'm okay with kind of going with maybe a lower tier option, first of all, cost, and second of all, the actual flavor of the caviar, there's not quite as much pressure on it because it's like playing with others, not just on its own. I'm gonna tell you a little secret. When you're using one of the more cost-effective options, they tend to be salted more heavily than other caviars. So before using this, get your strainer out, put this in the strainer and rinse it under cool water until that cool water runs clear. That gets some of that excess salt out of it. You get a little bit more of the actual egg flavor, and it just, it works better. Also, sometimes if you don't rinse it really well with these products, you'll get a little bit of a bleed off of it. So once you place it, it'll kind of like, some of the coloration will bleed into whatever you've put it on. So it's just easier if you rinse it first. All right, let's put our caviar on. One last step, which is going to be to place just a little few pieces of the microgreens. Another variation, this is broccoli microgreens. Another variation that's a really good flavor complement to this is also a little piece of baby arugula. That makes a really nice kind of leafy presentation and very complimentary flavor. But for this one, we're doing broccoli microgreens. Now, one of my favorite things about the Amuse Bouche is that you can have so much fun with how you present it. So I'm actually using, these are ceramic coasters that I bought just this last January in Jaipur, India. It's called Blue Pottery. Like I said, these are from my trip to Jaipur, and I'm gonna use them to serve my salmon caviar amuse bouche. So I'm gonna go ahead and place them on the coasters, and then we'll add those greens. Okay, so we've got our microgreens placed. I will tell you, obviously wash these really well, and before I put them into this little vessel for us to use, I did trim a little bottom of the stem off before I brought them out to add to our amuse bouche. So there's our first one. I hope you enjoyed that. Let's go to number 2. All right, so the second amuse bouche we're going to do today is from a recipe that I actually just developed just this last weekend. I was invited to a brunch on Saturday. Kind of a potluck type brunch. So, you know, there's kind of an expectation for, you know, the consummate host to bring something. So I always get motivated to like try something new. So I did a bruschetta, and I did it, I got the idea to do it not just with tomato, but with half tomato and half strawberry. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to make my bruschetta topping, but then instead of serving it like a bruschetta, we're actually gonna put just a small portion in a shot glass, and then add a little bit of basil to it, and then a couple of tiny segments of house-made croutons. So there'll be like a little individual shot of this really delicious, savory, sweet bruschetta topping. So let's do this. So we've got, we'll start with our strawberries. So there's a cup of diced strawberries, so we'll add that to our bowl. So we've got that. By the way, this is my grandmother's Pyrex bowl. I have the entire set and I treasure them so much. Okay, so there's our cup of strawberry. Now we're gonna add our cup of tomato. Perfect. Now I'm gonna be using, this is a, let's see, blackberry ginger balsamic vinegar. And again, this is from Baker and Olive. If you all have been following me, you know I mention them every chance I get. This amazing balsamic vinegar olive oil company out of Encinitas, California. So if you have a chance to check out their website, amazing products. So I'm going to, if I had to give you a defined amount, probably somewhere around maybe a tablespoon, tablespoon and a half. Of course, I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it here. Put that on. Pretty good, right there. And probably about half as much olive oil. So we'll just add a little bit of that. Kind of helps with the texture. And then from there, I'm gonna give us a couple of good pinches. I like to use Himalayan salt. So there's our salt component there. Awesome. And now let's just mix that up. This is another one of those dishes. It kind of reminds me of the gazpacho that we've made together. This is one of those dishes that's just so beautiful. Okay, now I also feel the same about making something like this as I do about something like a gazpacho or something that, you know, has fresh ingredients like this. If you can make it ahead of time and let it sit for a bit, you're gonna get that awesome like flavor combinations that they have when they're sitting together. You can certainly make it and serve it fresh, still delicious. But if you could give it 4 or 5 hours in the fridge before you actually got it ready to serve, plus you're gonna wanna make it ahead of time anyway. You don't wanna be, you know, messing with creating all of this when it's time to serve it. So the longer it can sit together, the better those flavors are together. So now we're gonna add this to our shot glasses. Okay, so we have our tomato strawberry kind of bruschetta topping mixture into our shot glasses. We're going to add a basil leaf to each of the glasses, and then we're gonna place a couple of these are house-made croutons that I actually cut into like quarters because I didn't want huge pieces on top of this. So a little trick to make your basil even more attractive in this, I took a little bit of the olive oil and I'm gonna go ahead and just rub that leaf with olive oil so that it's got a little bit of shine to it. Makes it nice and shiny and pretty. And then we're just gonna add that just like that. We'll add one to each of these. We've got our basil leaves added, and now we're going to put 2 or 3 of the little crouton pieces on top of each. All right, so there we go. There's our second Amuse Bouche. Now, for our third and final, we're gonna have some real fun. Okay, so for our third and final Amuse Bouche, we're going to do a wonderful little fun and fresh combination. We're gonna create a little bowl out of cucumber, and then we're gonna do a little bit of mint and kiwi in it, and then a dollop of a mango sorbetto, and then we're going to sprinkle it with a little bit of paprika. So we're getting that, you know, that heat, sweet, salt flavor combo going, and then we're gonna finish with an edible flower. And edible flowers tend to be kind of on the peppery side. So we've got just a really wonderful combination of flavors, exploring sweet and salty and just very fresh to introduce an entree. So let's get started. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're going to peel our cucumber. So this is an organic English cucumber. And what's awesome about these is they tend to be thin-skinned, so you can eat the skin. So what we're going to do is we're just gonna peel, in strips so we get that little striation of peel and cucumber showing through. Okay, once we've got our cucumber peeled, like I said, we're kind of, leaving a little bit of the skin on just for visual and texture. We're gonna go ahead and cut it into about 1-inch pieces. So we'll cut the end off, then we'll just come down to, just kind of eyeball it, but about 1-inch pieces. All right, once we get those pieces cut, what we're gonna do is we'll stand them up. Like I said, these are gonna be our little bowls that we're making. So from here, what you're gonna do is you're gonna angle in with the knife and cut inward, but you don't wanna go all the way through. You wanna make sure that we leave a bottom on it so that when we put our sorbetto in it, it will actually contain the sorbetto. So we'll go through, just work your way around. Be careful, you wanna get as close to the edge as possible, but don't go all the way through the edge. Just like that. And there we have our little bowl. All right, once we have our little cucumber bowls made, now we're gonna take our kiwi and we've gotta peel it first thing. So we'll peel our kiwi. All right, now that we have our kiwi peeled, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna cut it into slices. And then from there, we're actually going to cut on one side of where the seeds are, and then turn it around and cut the opposite side. So we're actually just gonna be using a little piece from each of the side, no seeds. And then once you've done that, you're gonna cut a little angle at the top so we have a nice pointy piece to use as our accent. All right, so we've got our 7 bowls, we've got our 7 little pieces of kiwi here. Now all we have to do is put this together. Okay, now that we have our mint leaf into each of the cucumber bowls, we're gonna add our little sliver of kiwi. Okay, so now we have our sprig of mint leaf, we've got our little piece of kiwi in each of the cucumber bowls. We're going to now put our little dollop of the mango sorbetto. And what I use to do that is, I actually use a melon baller because obviously a normal ice cream scoop or even like a cookie scoop, which is smaller, is still too big. So I use a melon baller, and then I just use one of my little cocktail spoons to get the sorbetto out of the melon baller. So let's give that a shot. Oh, I forgot to say, bowl of warm water so we can warm our spoon up before we dip into the sorbetto. You want to dry it off with a paper towel though, because you don't want to dilute the sorbetto. You just want the spoon to be warm. All right, so we've got our sorbetto, our mango sorbetto, into each of our little cucumber bowls. And so now the second to the last step is just a very light sprinkle with a paprika. So it's gonna give it some beautiful color and just a tiny bit of heat to complement the sweetness of the sorbetto. Once that's done, we're gonna move those over to our serving plate. All right, let's do that final step that really brings that element of texture, color, and surprise to this particular amuse bouche. So we're adding the edible flowers. All right, so that's it for number 3. We're gonna bring everything back and have a little chat about how you might pair these with particular meals. All right, so we'll do a super quick recap. We have got our delicious smoked salmon and caviar on that thin sliced multigrain bread. That was our first one that we created. We then have our tomato strawberry bruschetta inspired shot with a little piece of basil and some house-made crouton pieces. And then finally, we have our organic English cucumber bowls with a little serving of a mango sorbetto, a mint leaf, a little piece of kiwi, a sprinkle of paprika, and an edible flower. And just to remind you, edible flowers do bring a bit of a kind of sometimes an even peppery flavor to something. So not only do they bring color and texture, but they do enhance the flavor of that. So this would be a great amuse bouche that would maybe help us segue to a fish or a seafood type main entree. The tomato and strawberry shot would be awesome for like heavy red meats or anything that have like heavy sauces with them. So that would be a good option here. And then this super fresh would also be a great option to transition to maybe a poultry dish or even some sort of a kind of summer offering. So those will give you some ideas of how you might be able to use these particular amuse bouches or let them inspire you. Thank you so much for being with us today. Our manifesto moment is, we believe that details should be dreamy. The tiniest flourish can spark the brightest memory. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We're so glad you were here, and we'll see you next week.